Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Podcast with your host, Dr. Tony Huang. Today, I'm with a special guest, Eleanor. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Tony. I'm Eleanor Lightbody. I'm the CEO of Luminance. And at Luminance, we are building, you can think of them as like legal grade AI brains for organizations.
Very cool. So I'm curious, what the landscape scene looked like for legal, like before Gen AI, and like what happened when Gen AI was like introduced. Like, what were some like big trends that happened?
Yeah, so look, a machine learning and text has been around for a long time and it's been directed at lots of different areas. At Luminance, we were founded 10 years ago by machine learning experts, actually by mathematicians, where they got together, they had friends of theirs who were lawyers, and their friends were complaining about the hours that they're putting into very similar work. And so at the time, I think it was, well, they built the systems off of supervised and unsupervised machine learning, and they took it to law firms to say, hey, you know that you're reviewing copious amounts of data, we can help you out and we can help you become much more efficient in those reviews. Now, of course, with generative AI, I suppose what really transformed um, the, I think if you take a step back, I think to change humans' behaviors, I often think it can't be just like 2x as good. It almost needs to be 10x as good. And so that with the introduction of transformer-based models, that's really when we saw the like change of behaviors and like the acceleration and the expansion of what the technology could do. So rather than just using AI to help you find key information within contracts, it opened up so many more doors. It really allowed you to automate parts of the workflow end to end. So, every single organization in the world has to kind of review contracts, has to, well, they receive contracts, they process them, and then they decide what to do with them afterwards. And they've got to keep on coming back to answer questions and to stay ahead of both risk and regulations. And with generative AI, that change management piece and what you can do with it has obviously like massively accelerated.
Yeah, so I've been like keeping track on like what's happening with Gen AI and like in the legal space, and originally started off with like some like, kind of like some rough news where like two lawyers got in trouble for like showing like ChatGPT produced like cases that weren't real. How has that how has like accuracy increased back then to now? Like have you seen like accuracies for like case law and like being able to do RAG a lot better, or like what have you seen in terms of like just at the start of Gen AI until now, like what has been like a really big trend that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose before Gen AI, it was you had to give the system lots of positive and negative examples, and so there was a huge amount of training from the end user on what they thought to teach the system of what was good, what was accurate, what wasn't. Now, if you think about what's really important is, I think accountability and transparency. So at Luminance, we don't really focus on kind of case law. We focus on like automating a contract process end to end. And you can only do that if the outputs are either reliable or if they are explainable. And so a lot of those conversations that people are talking about at the moment is around, how these new models have chain of thought, and so they can go and explain exactly what they're doing and the steps that they're taking to come up to an answer. But actually, like that's moved on. At Luminance, we realized relatively early on that like it's not just about how the models get to an answer or a model gets to an answer. It's how you can use multiple models to come to check each other's homework to make sure that there's consensus across the models. And if there's consensus across the models, then it means that the answer is more likely to be accurate. And if there isn't, you then can add some probabilistic maths to that. And you say, what's the probability of this being the right answer? And if it's not over a certain threshold, then the AI reverts back to the human and it reverts back to the lawyer and says, you know what, we don't know the answer here. Can you please give us can you point us in the right direction? And then you can train it on the fly. And I think, unlike other areas, when you're working with lawyers, that is so key. They need to start using this on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, to start using agentic, I suppose, agents and agentic frameworks on top of large language models. The most important thing is, is the data accurate and are the outputs accurate? And then you can start automating tasks in parallel.
Like where's the line between like helpful automation and like being just over reliant on like AI generated responses? Like how do you help like clients navigate the balance?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think what we do is everything that's automated, you can still see the steps that have been taken to automate. So a good example is when your customer's reviewing a contract, they'll receive it within Microsoft Word, they'll press a button, and the AI can rewrite the whole contract to be more aligned with that company's positions. But you can still just review the red lines if you want to, just to give you that extra level of assurance. There are, other certain negotiations or that we would advise customers not to use that functionality because, it's $100 million deal and they should spend some more time focusing on the outputs and the suggestions that the AI has given it. So it really depends on the use case. Likewise, when you're asking, when you automating like a workflow. So a good example would be using agents to, if I come in on a daily basis and I've got a question for marketing, and marketing's asking me, of the contracts that we signed last week or last month, which ones have written consent, and in that written consent, which ones have a PR clause, which ones have a like use case clause, which ones have a speaking clause. Historically, I'd have to go into Luminance and then like literally search that, and I would get the answers in a summary very quickly, but I would still have to go and do the searching myself. Agents can now do that automatically for you and do all of those tasks in parallel for you. That that all of that work should be automated off. But actually, if you are maybe answering a regulation, you probably want to spend more time reviewing the outputs and then reviewing the decisions that you're making thereafter.
I'm curious if like when an agent, like an AI agent makes a mistake in a legal context, like who's accountable for that mistake?
So it sits with the customer. My kind of answer to that is like, I'm definitely not perfect. I've definitely made many mistakes in my career, and I'm sure I'm going to continue to make mistakes. Use the AI where you know it's very good at. And the great thing about especially like our systems is that, as I said, but you don't have to trust it from day one. You can review, like it's all there. All of the outputs are there for you to review. So before you start saying I'm going to totally hand this over to someone, you can review it first, and then you get accustomed to its conclusions, to the way that it's working, and in time you start to trust it, and you start handing over more and more responsibilities to it.
Cool. So, like, what does like a trustworthy AI actually mean when like the stakes are like $1 billion M&A deal, or like regulatory compliance?
So that is when two different things. Like if it's an M&A, it depends on the use case. If it's just for review, it's like understanding the clauses that you're looking for, understanding that there is different language within a similar clause, and giving you the answers to those specific questions that you're looking for. And then with regulations, it's actually being able to pull in different data feeds and having the data feeds cross-reference what's in your contracts and saying, of these contracts, these ones are now exposed, and this is the ramifications of it. So a good example would be like the tariffs and using a system, our system to say tariffs have just been updated. They've been updated on a weekly basis at the moment. Can you help me help tell me what the monetary risk is, what the monetary costs are, what the ramifications are now of all these changes? And our AI agent will basically find all the contracts in all the different, like all the suppliers in the different locations, and it will tell you this is the new change, this is the cost of the change, and these are the suggested next steps that you should take essentially. And that allows for humans that would have taken, weeks, if not months, to trawl through all that information and to find and cross-reference it or across something else. It now happens within, minutes.
So you guys just closed like a big $75 million Series C round, which congratulations. It's a, you did it during like a really challenging funding environment. What like convinced like investors that legal AI was worth like betting big right now?
I don't think that our investors needed much convincing, to be honest with you, because we were actively approached. We weren't actually raising our Series C. It was opportunistic. But I think the main thing is that if you think about it, every single company in the world is broken down into three things. It's their people, their processes, and their contracts, really. And so much time is spent on, actually just spent on very like repetitive tasks that should be automated, and B, there's so much work that you can mine out of your existing contracts that can really like set you apart. And so I think that legal tech, we've always believed, this is why we've been doing this for 10 years. We've always believed that this is one of the biggest markets and opportunities for AI. And I think a lot of investors also, that resonates with a lot of investors.
So like how are you competing with like big tech giants who are like pouring billions of dollars into AI? Like what's your like advantage?
Yeah, look, I think with legal, it's, as we said, like making sure that the outputs are trusted and accurate is so key. And you can only do that in a few different ways. So the first is that we had early access to law firms' data. Basically, for 5 years, we were training our own systems on data, and it's not just the data, but it's the quality of the data, it's the pre-labeling, it's the training. That's, one part of it. And so, sure, you can get ChatGPT to write you a contract, but like you have no consistency, you have no assurances that it's necessarily like a valid one, the one that you were talking about. Again, case law, many examples where lawyers have spoken about something for it not to be true. The second thing is that like we're focused on the end-to-end workflow. And it's not just about using AI to help you answer questions within contracts. It's about, okay, as an organization, I have contract might need to be reviewed by procurement, it might need to be reviewed by then legal, it might then need to go to sales, then there'll be like another version, and there's like a whole journey that a contract goes through before it even gets signed. And then when it gets signed, what are the alerts that I need to be reminded of when there's changes in the environment that I'm operating in? How do I make sure that I am, ahead of those? And so you have to build like a platform approach, an end-to-end platform approach, to really provide value, I think, across the board. And most enterprises, our customers include, someone like AMD or Coke Industries, they want something that's going to help them at every touch point that they have, rather than it be kind of one single contract specific.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the platform you guys have developed in-house? Just kind of like walk us through some highlights.
Yeah, so one thing that we realized again early on was lawyers are creatures of habit, and so you have to meet them where they're used to working. And something that we did very as soon as transformer-based technologies came out was we decided to integrate our AI into Microsoft Word, because lawyers were so used to negotiating in Microsoft Word. When you receive a contract, you can actually just send that contract off to Luminance and you'll get notified when the AI has reviewed it, or you can just go straight into Microsoft Word, press a button, and there are two modes in which it works. It can either automatically rewrite any clauses that aren't compliant to your standards, and you would just have to review the red lines and send it over. Or if it's a more complex contract, it will highlight red, yellow, and green what is okay for you as a business and what's not okay. And it will say that, when it's red, it will say this is not okay, you shouldn't agree to this, and these are the reasons why you shouldn't agree to it. Then when you finish negotiating, it will just get saved into, you just access it through your URL. You get total insights into your contracts. You can search for any key information. You get notified from any changes that you might be wanting to look at. And you have then the ability to offset a lot of the work that legal teams are doing to like sales teams, because they can now create contracts without having to go to the legal teams. Procurement now gets insights into POs and whether there's been data leakage between a PO getting signed and that renewal. So it's we talk about legal contracts because it's quite easy to like conceptualize that, but actually the benefits of this is cross-departmental.
So like looking beyond like legal, like where else do you see agentic AI transforming like compliance heavy industries?
Yeah, I mean, like I think agentic AI is going to be transforming a lot of things beyond legal and beyond compliance. But the areas that we're focused on, I mean, personally, off topic, I'm very excited for an AI to be able to book my travel. I seem to always get my travel wrong, and so if it can understand, the meeting in my diary is actually the day to book the flight for, super excited. But when it comes to Luminance itself and legal, I think that there's so much work that legal does that's beyond just legal contracts, as I mentioned. So when you think about procurement, think about the fact that you've got to cross-reference like a purchase order form with an MHA, a master hosted agreement. Then sometimes you also need to make sure that the services that you've agreed to are actually being delivered. And so agents will be able to start piecing that all together and saying, yeah, absolutely, all of this work has been delivered. That's fine. You can pay the supplier. Well, actually, no, you can't pay the supplier because these are the things that haven't quite happened. And even before you actually even get to that stage, it's like many large enterprises have countries that they can't necessarily, like there are higher risk at, or they have suppliers where like if they're about to embark on a relationship, they need to have a few additional procurement checks or additional compliance checks. And so when you receive that initial kind of scope of relationship, using agents to be able to give you a first pass of like, these are the things that you need to do before continuing this partnership, or these are the things you need to get into place, I think is very, very useful.
So like in the future, how will like relationships between professionals and like AI agents like evolve? You think that we'll still call them like AI assistants or just, something else entirely?
I think we're going to call them something else entirely, but that's just my own guess. Why do I think that? Because I think that they're going to become more than just agents. At the moment we're thinking about them as assistants, and we're thinking about them supercharging the work that you're doing and being able to do multiple initiatives or multiple tasks at once on your behalf. I think in time, like that's going to shift. I think a lot of time that I spend, a lot of the time that I spend thinking is around how the future of AI is going to change the interactions of software that we all love and that we're all very used to. Are we going to be going into emails anymore? Are we going to be using Microsoft Word to negotiate contracts? What does that look like if agents are able, if agents get to the point where they like are so trusted and their speed and their accuracy is of such high quality that you almost shift from the human telling the AI what to do to the AI coming back, doing the work, and then coming back and saying, "Are you okay with this?"
Like in your opinion, what do you think is like the biggest like misconception people have about where AI is headed in like the enterprise application space?
Well, I don't know if there's any misconceptions because I think there's no unified agreement on this, is there? So I think that it's going to go lots of different ways. I think a lot of the conversations until recently have all spoken about augmenting humans. I think that, if we think about this realistically, I think that there's going to be a lot of disruption. I think there's going to be lot of benefits to societies and to humans. I also think that there's going to be some stuff that, we really have to pay attention to today. I'm maybe an optimist, and I believe that there's a lot of roles or like a lot of kind of um, areas of focus that are emerging that have never existed before. So hopefully there'll be more and more like different opportunities for people. But the skill sets that we will need, I think, are going to have already radically changed, and I think that they're going to continue to change.
And like what's like one AI capability like you're excited about that most people don't know is coming? For me, I think it's gonna be like MCP, like model control protocol, like something's on the horizon around that. What do you think's about to happen?
Yeah, MTV, ADA, like the agents. This is quite a niche one, but at the moment, plugging in data sources from other areas, we talk about APIs and we talk about integrations. I think that's all going to radically change. And like within a click of a button, you can choose the data source on which your agent is kind of collaborating with. So there'll be a lot more kind of software collaboration in the future than we've ever seen before in a much easier and kind of streamlined way.
And then for like viewers at home who are in like the startup space, like what's the best advice for founders trying to build trustworthy AI in like a heavily regulated industry?
I think you never know what journey you're going to take, and so like don't strive for perfection. I know that that's probably something that people have heard before, but my best piece of advice was get something to a customer and or a few customers and get their advice quickly. Don't think that you know what you're building because actually that will change and it will morph. And getting live feedback as soon as possible is probably one of the most valuable things that you can get.
And then like what's next for you guys? Like what's on the horizon? Anything like big that you can like kind of discuss and disclose?
I think so. I'm not sure whether our marketing team are going to agree to this or not, but yeah, absolutely. So we are launching our compliance module and our procurement module. So we're kind of expanding out our agents to help across those two different divisions. That's really come off the back of our customers like asking us for it. So that's super exciting. And we're working closer and closer to kind of automating as many kind of workflows as possible.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I learned so much about legal AI. Do you have any like final thoughts on for the viewers?
I think, like anything, for hopefully your viewers and your listeners are very AI native or like excited for it, otherwise they wouldn't be listening to the podcast. But you've got to try, you've got to start building, and you've got to start thinking about doing it today. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind. And the most important thing is any I think most companies now hopefully will allow the people to trial it before you decide to kind of embark on that partnership. If you're building a company, that keep that to mind.
Well, thanks again for being on the show. And until next time, stay curious.
Thank you, Tony.